Hello, my name is Heather Nelson, and I'm here to tell you about one of my students, a deaf student, a pretty special guy. So we met this boy very soon after we had moved here to the country of Panama. We found him on the Nobe Bugle Reservation. He was down a muddy, steep hill that you cannot drive down, you have to walk. In a thatched hut where he lived with his family in a little town called Oma. So he was 4 when we first met him. He was very skinny with a distended belly. He had an alarming cough. His skin was like patchwork. We didn't know why at that time. We found out later. And he had a lot of wounds and infected places on his skin, his legs and arms. He had a great big old smile though. So his family told us he doesn't hear or speak. And they told us that his name was Moses, but it was pretty obvious that this child did not know that he even had a name. He had no language and he was in pretty bad shape. So I was there in Panama actually looking for deaf indigenous children, and so he fit the bill in every way. I was actually looking for him. He was a deaf kid. He had no language. He had been abandoned by his mom, and he was considered cursed by the tribe. So for me, he was an incredibly precious sight, though. So previously in my other life, I had been a sign language interpreter. So I had spent the majority of my life since I was a young girl in Maryland trying to learn this incredibly expressive and beautiful, fascinating language, this conceptual language of the deaf. I had a deaf cousin who I adored. And so I struggled in classes, professional classes, in ASL grammar and syntax and storytelling, fingerspelling, and it came so effortlessly to my cousin and to the deaf people that I knew. I was just amazed and still am. So finally, it's like, look, I decided I have to take the plunge and really learn this language. So you go, if you want to learn sign language, you go to Gallaudet University. If you want to learn French, you go to France. If you want to learn sign language, you can go to Gallaudet, and everybody there signs. So it's one of the only universities in the world for the deaf. So there, everybody signs. At the cafeteria, at the bank. My boss was deaf. So you just learn immersion, right? And so when you're there, you realize that really the only thing that deaf people cannot do is hear. And I saw that up close. And I got proficient at the language as much as I could. I learned a lot. I was exposed to kind of the higher echelons of deaf people. They had very high level jobs in the government. At Gallaudet, I met doctors, I met PhDs, I met educators, I met programmers. And then after I was an interpreter, I worked around DC and Maryland and Virginia and Florida and Georgia and Africa. And I met just the highest level of deaf people. They worked in the State Department and they worked at the Pentagon. I worked at the Pentagon. Programmers and engineers. I worked for the Navy. Just all over, and just really exposed to the highest level, people with just great abilities. They just happened to be deaf, and they were my clients. And so a lot of times their abilities in sign language was way above mine, and there's a reason for that. It's because of the uniquely visual language that they use. So some have been signing ever since they were very young. It's their first language, and their brains develop differently. So there are things that their brains are uniquely good at. They excel at things that involve spatial things, engineering, art, architecture, computer programming, things like that. So meanwhile, back in Oma, I had pulled out my iPhone and I was taking pictures, and Moses had probably never seen himself. It was important to me though that he knew that he had a name. So I gave him a name, Moses, and I would sign it to him, an M right here on the cheek, and I would point to him, and I'd point to the picture on the phone, and I'd say, you have a name, darling. This is your name, Moses. You have a name. And so something interesting happened. So we both kind of had a moment, and we both smiled real big, and I saw something click in his eyes. It was an intelligence and this kind of impish, mischievous grin. And so anyway, so I started taking pictures, kept taking pictures, and he was watching me very intently. Like, what is this? Who is that? What is she doing? What is she up to? So being in Oma is like taking a step back in time. It's very primitive conditions. It's lots of mud and trash and smoke from the cooking fires. The women are cooking outdoor over open fires, outdoor kitchens. Lots of pigs and chickens and emaciated dogs everywhere, just running in and out of the sleeping quarters and in and out of the kitchen and all over the food. Flies and mosquitoes. So Moses' hut did not have electricity or running water. It since still does not have electricity. We got them running water actually for the whole community. They have clean water. I'm very grateful for that. We were able to do that for the community because they have a deaf child in their midst. So the women all wore these beautiful dresses, these traditional dresses. They're just really bright in this dirty, dingy environment. There was just these bright colors that they would wear. Moses, however, he just wore only dirty, tattered underwear and no shoes, and he was filthy. He was a mess. And again, just flies and infected wounds. So meanwhile, he's still watching me on my iPhone. So very gently he reached up and he indicated he wanted to see what on earth I'm doing. What am I looking at? And so I gave him my phone and he started swiping the screen. He had been watching me as he'd seen me do to look at the pictures. And he'd push the home button and I showed him the camera icon and the record button and he was off. So he's taking videos and pictures, and it's he didn't seem very impressed or very surprised at this turn of events. I know he'd never seen a smartphone or barely probably a television before, but it was just like, finally you showed up and I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting to get my hands on this box. And thank you very much for finally, making it here. It was just another interesting moment. I had a couple of those where I just had something was dawning on me. I didn't know. I'm like, okay, what is going on here? There was a glimmer of the possibilities to come, I remember. So fast forward to today. So Moses is still very tiny for his age. He's still the only deaf child that I found, indigenous child on the reservation. There's other deaf kids kind of far away. But I'm really specifically looking for deaf kids with no language, indigenous, tribal. And so I've invested all of my energy and all of my passion and our resources and on Moses. And then, of course, his family. So we've gotten really involved in his family, built them a house, a solid, safe house with a door and a lock. It's dangerous there at night, especially if you're a deaf kid. And mostly there's so many children and women that more and more that live in this house because it's safe. So he has a safe place, from the snakes and all that, and then to his community as well. So like I mentioned, we got clean water for the whole community, and they're learning English and they're learning sign language, his community, which is so cool. And of course, we're going to start a computer programming after school program for the Nobe, for the tribal kids. Of course we would do that, right? So we work with other tribes, we work with many other communities, we work with just the non-tribal, the non-indigenous Latin area here where I live. He lives about 40 minutes from my house, Moses, down the hill. So he still struggles with his health, and he still has these chronic skin issues and lesions, and they're made worse by the crushing poverty and the dirty, muddy world that he lives in. But I just have to tell you that he is an absolute delight to my teacher soul. He is so funny. And he likes to trick me, and he'll just tease me, and it just makes me laugh. He's so sweet, and he's very nurturing. He's nurturing to his family, to his grandma, and he'll share and make sure that all the babies, and not all of them, but he'll make sure that the children and the babies are taken care of, and he'll let to kiss them and the puppies as well. And he's just oh so smart. So he hacks my system, my iPad educational games. He wants to win, and he wants to win quick. So he'll bypass all of the learning that he can and hack my game. And if there's a shortcut, he'll find it, and he wants to win quick. He gets bored really quickly. He challenges me. I have this fabulous game or this fabulous project, and he's okay, next. Okay, yeah, I can do this. Like, really, kid? Like, you don't even, you live in mud. How, you don't have a TV? How are you bored already? So he just loves to learn. He's just a pleasure to have as a student. And he looks after me as well. Like, if I leave something, or he's like, he cleans up after me, and he does my bags, and he'll look after me. He'll fan me. Like, oh my gosh, he's so sweet. He's like, it gets hot down there. We're outside in the mud, in the temporary hut that I teach in. Lots of mud. So after I go back and forth to the States, and I had learned about the revolution that was happening in the States around computer programming. So I got online and was doing some research, and that's how I found Shireen and Deaf Kids Code. And as I was looking at her resources and the wonderful work that she does, just another one of those moments, like, oh, Deaf Kids Code. Well, of course they do. Of course, Deaf Kids Code. Of course they do. So it was kind of this aha moment, and everything just clicked, and knowing and loving the visual language, ASL, and plus the power and the possibility of coding as I'm learning. I didn't know anything about it as I'm learning and still learning. It's just a natural pairing. It is a natural together, ASL and coding. So so deaf kids learn primarily through their eyes, right? Their ears don't give them a lot of information. So everything, they're so visually oriented. As I'm teaching literacy, everything is visual, everything. So they think in pictures and concepts more than hearing people, as we're just linear, word, 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 word. You can't say like 4 words at the same time, but you can have, 4 kind of concepts at the same time. Like a picture's worth 1,000 words. So cool. So I believe that ASL is a great platform, actually, to work with technology. It's a 3-dimensional, like, high-tech language. Do you know what I'm saying? It's fully formed language, but it's 3-dimensional. Like, if I'm talking to you and I want to talk about, something, a sword, I can put a sword here and use it and then put it back into space, and I have to remember where it is and this person. So it's 3-dimensional. So it's kind of a high-tech language, and it's just perfect match to talking about technology and computers and engineering and all of those things. So and because ASL it's the natural native language of the deaf through their eyes, because it's fully accessible through their eyes, and their brains develop differently. The synapses and everything, they develop conceptually. It's just different because they don't have access through their ears. So different things develop through their eyes and concepts, and their brains are different, which is why, as a professional sign language interpreter working at the Pentagon, I could not match even some of the kind of lower level deaf people. Their language, I couldn't approach it. I could not approach it as much as I tried. And that's why, because I default hearing people, even if we know sign, we default to our ears because our brains, that's how they communicate. They're just, we default to our ears to try and understand what's going on. Deaf people don't have that. They default to their eyes, and it's just different. It's just different. And, so if you have the honor and the privilege of watching this process, in this realm of deaf kids learning to code and program, kind of for the first time in robotics, and having them introduced, if you have the privilege of seeing this process, it is the most delightful and kind of sacred kind of magic. It's just incredibly inspiring work. So, and also, so if you know the benefits of children, kind of all children, learning coding, there's so many, and Shireen will tell you There's just so many. I couldn't even tell you all of them. There's problem solving, cognitive thinking, creativity, expression, potential future job skills, and the list goes on and on. So with Moses, I use Osmo, I use Sphero, I use Scratch Junior, several other games, Foos, things like that. But Scratch Junior has been great. So he's learned that really without a whole lot of input from me. So his favorite story is the Three Pigs, the Three Little Pigs. So that's the very first story he ever understood. Again, he is non-lingual. He does not have a language. But the iPad has a visual story. I think it's coded, but it's animated with real pigs and real wolves, and he loves that story. So we've used that and we code it. So we code it, or he does. We both do, through Scratch. So he'll pick the pig and he'll do the color and add things to it, and then he'll choose the house that he wants and make it big or small, and then animate it and code it, and he's learning. So I'm always trying to throw in literacy. That's really the most important thing for him, is to be able to communicate in literacy and to know. So I'm teaching sign language. So as we do this, it's the pigs and the wolf and the house, the casa, the wolf. So a lot of fun stuff to do with that. But we use coding, so that helps him express himself. Another way for him to express himself. So I want to know what's going on in his little soul. So badly. So all of that kind of stuff is online. You can read about the benefits of sign language, but many benefits of sign language, the benefits of coding. You put the two together, wow. So, and what you might not know is that we really need, in my opinion, these deaf children and their unique conceptual perspective of the world. So to illustrate that, I have one last story. When I was visiting back in Maryland, I was in Starbucks, because there is no Starbucks in Panama. Go figure. So I go, right to Starbucks, and I was signing to my husband. It was a noisy environment and he couldn't hear me. So we sign, comes in handy. And this older gentleman approached me and he said, are you deaf? I said, no. I said, oh, is he deaf, your husband? No. He said, well, what's up? So I said, well, it's a long story. He said, well, I have time, tell me your story. So we sat down over coffee, and he was probably sorry he asked. So it's a very long story. So I'm telling him my story. And it turns out this guy that just happened to approach me, he's a computer programmer, and he actually works for the State Department in D.C. I go back, my family's in Maryland. So he's in D.C., which is close by where we were. And he is not only a programmer, but he, back in the day, so he must be 65 or so, I'm not sure. Back in the day, he set up the mainframe programs for the State Department, and he still maintains them. So he was going to work that evening at 3 o'clock, and so he works to keep us safe as a nation, and he set up the program, and he teaches. Just an incredible guy. Just this guru, and he just tells great stories. The story of him, and he bought a Porsche when he was 25. It just happened to be purple. And anyway, it's a long story. He is so funny. But he was educated, he told me, 60 odd years ago in Maryland, way back in the day. A deaf kid is put into a multi-handicapped classroom. And so they thought that he was mentally challenged. And he wasn't. He certainly wasn't. Very common. That still happens today. You can't speak. You sound funny. There must be something wrong with your brain. It was not true. So once he learned sign language, everything changed. And I asked him. I said, I just have this theory that deaf people would make better programmers because their brain. He's like, well, yeah. He agreed with me. He said he knew of this other programmer that he revered that was deaf, that all the programmers, and I think it was for like NSA, or maybe it was the State Department, but that guy had just such ability and such special perspective that nobody could approach his level of knowledge, and he just had such a different perspective. Deaf man. He didn't really sign, said he wasn't very social, but he didn't really speak, but he was just, his language was sign language, and that supports his learning sign language young and using it every day supports this conceptual perspective of your brain, a very precious thing. So anyway, meanwhile, back here in Panama, that gentleman, the programmer I met at Starbucks, and his wife, they go to Panera, and we get on Skype, and I bring Moses over here with some of his family, and they go with flashcards and in my living room. So Moses is very impressed with this gentleman, that he knows so much sign. Like, he knows that, like frog. Wow. Like, yeah, you have no idea what he knows. So in the future, that gentleman, he and his wife just love Moses. They've just been really touched by his story. And, in the future, what a great contact to have. So, Moses could be driving around in a purple Porsche. I don't know. I'm just saying. But what I'm trying to get across to you is that, in the future, we're going to need some really good programmers. We don't know what the landscape is going to look like with technology, the way things are exploding, the way that people are trying to come in and harm us, and for national security. So this friend of mine, he helps keep us safe nationally, personally, and the attacks are going to get greater. So we need people of greater ability. So I'm just saying, these children have this unique ability, and it could prove that ability could really benefit us all in a lot of ways. And Shireen will tell you, not just national security, but all of these career paths are going to need programmers, and the potential is just wide open for that. And I'm just saying that the language it's just a perfect pairing with coding, and the deaf people are more adept at it than even a hearing person trying to learn sign language. So I'm just saying it's an exciting time. And so what I've learned from all of this is a lot. So I've learned a lot from Moses. I think that we can learn. So that potential sometimes is locked up in a person or a child, and they're just waiting for somebody to come with the right key to unlock, and all this potential can explode and bloom, and we can all benefit from that. And we need that. We need their input and their ideas and their personalities and this little child just blesses my life with his little soul and his kindness and his tenaciousness and his bravery. So we have the golden key. I believe coding is a golden key that can unlock the potential in so many people that previously, it's the great equalizer, Shireen will tell you, but just to unlock, and especially with deaf kids, because of the language and their conceptual, precious little brains. So thank you, and we can all benefit from that. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Shireen, for allowing me to tell the story. And man, we have this key, so let's get at it. Thanks. Bye.